Tonight on The Nation Speaks, what's going on in California? And in Georgia, a vote integrity watchdog tells us what he's seeing ahead of the Senate runoff election. Good evening and welcome to The Nation Speaks. I'm your host, Cindy Drucare. Joining us tonight is John Phillips. He's a talk show host at KABC in LA and a columnist at the Southern California News Group. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
So there's a lot going on in California, and I know you've got your finger on all of it. So we're going to talk about a few things. Why don't you start by telling us what's going on with the new DA, George Gascon, and he's made some pretty big changes pretty quickly. What's that about?
Yeah, well, he's a DA who was installed by George Soros, who essentially paid for the independent expenditures in the campaign and bought the race against incumbent District Attorney Jackie Lacey, who had been there for a while. And he has essentially announced that he's going to not prosecute most crimes. So if you're a prostitute, if you are a homeless person, if you're committing some kind of crime, don't worry, George Gascon is not going to prosecute. If you are a law-abiding resident of Los Angeles County, get a life alert.
There's already been some cases in LA where victims have brought lawsuits against the DA for not prosecuting. Is that correct?
Yeah, you have multiple cases of that. And he's also resentencing people who have already been convicted. I mean, he has pledged to resentence virtually everyone convicted in Los Angeles County by the LA County DA's office. And I've been talking to people who've been freaking out over this, including Deborah Tate, who is the sister of Sharon Tate, who was killed by the Manson family, who is absolutely freaking out over the possibility that she is going to have to go to these parole hearings because all the Manson family killers have been convicted and sentenced. But usually she shows up to their hearings to be released and has someone from the LA DA's office there by her side. Now she's going to have to fight the defense attorney and the LA County DA's office to try to keep these people in prison. It's bonkers.
Is he giving a rationale for this? Seems like a pretty dramatic change.
Yeah, it's ideological. I mean, he is going there not as someone who wants to apply the law fairly to people, as someone who's interested in criminal justice, who's interested in taking care of victims' rights. He is there to push an agenda, and that agenda is to empty the prisons, that the legal system is racist, and therefore any conviction is not necessarily valid. And homeless people are there because of greedy capitalists. So he needs to be there to even the score.
So he's not the only controversial one in California right now. Governor Gavin Newsom has a recall petition against him. I think they have 800,000 signatures now. And what's the threshold? 1.5 million are needed to get it on a ballot? What's the situation there?
Yeah, they're going to need to just about double their numbers. However, the anger in this state towards Gavin Newsom is off the charts. I haven't seen any polls as it relates to the recall quite yet. However, just anecdotally going around and doing my day-to-day business, talking to Uber drivers, talking to people. I mean, people who aren't political animals are angered at the fact that he has closed down restaurants, he's closed down gyms, he's closed down movie theaters, he's closed down any number of businesses who just want to operate lawfully, while he and his cronies violate the same restrictions that they put on the rest of us. He was, of course, caught at the French Laundry, having a very expensive meal where I hear the bar tab was $17,000. Sheila Kuehl in Los Angeles County, after she voted to shut down all of the restaurants, went to her favorite neighborhood Italian restaurant in Santa Monica. The mayor of San Jose, Sam Liccardo, who said, don't celebrate Thanksgiving with your family, celebrated Thanksgiving with a huge family celebration. So the people of California see these officials issuing these edicts to all of us, and then they don't follow it themselves.
So what do you think is going to happen there? Do you think there is a chance for a recall? Are people that angry, or is this more of a venting anger kind of move?
Well, let me put it this way. There is a better than even chance that it qualifies for the ballot. And if it qualifies for the ballot, it could impact behavior. And it could cause Gavin Newsom to speed up opening up the California economy, or it could push him further to the left and thinking, hey, I need to keep my base in line. That's what happened to Gray Davis. Gray Davis, back in the early 2000s, was thought of as being a moderate Democrat in California. And we had the electricity crisis, we had a bunch of problems, we had a raise in the vehicle license fee, and he decided that he needed to tack to the left to keep his base in order once the recall qualified for the ballot. That turned out to be a very big mistake. That being said, mistakes are often repeated.
I understand. So recently in LA County, they shut down outdoor dining. Is that right?
They did, yeah. If you want to eat in LA County, you're going to have to order your dinner in your car through a clown's nose, because fast food restaurants are pretty much the only thing that's open.
So how is that going over?
Well, we're all getting fatter. And people are angry. They have contact tracing information. We know where people are contracting COVID-19. And outdoor dining is not one of those places. People are contracting COVID-19 in their homes. They're contracting it in the grocery stores. They're contracting it at large private gatherings like house parties. They're not contracting it at restaurants eating outdoors. The reason they targeted those restaurants was because they rely on licenses, business licenses, alcohol licenses, and so therefore they were easy to target.
And there's also what's going on in California. Some people, some big companies leaving California. I think Elon Musk has said he's going to leave Silicon Valley. What's going on there? Why is it really widespread, and why are companies leaving?
Yeah, Elon Musk, Larry Ellison, Joe Rogan, the famous podcast host, recently announced that he's leaving California. Look, I mean, the only reason that people would leave the beach for the desert is because of government regulation. California is the most beautiful, aesthetically beautiful state in the nation. We have mountains, we have beaches, we have deserts, we have forests, we have everything in between. But the oppressive nature of the government and the oppressive and arbitrary nature of the lockdowns are forcing people out. And I would note this. There's a difference in who's leaving the state today as opposed to 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. After the Cold War ended and we had these manufacturing jobs leave the state, leave the country, we had all the military bases closed down, you had people who were essentially economically destitute who were leaving to find a better future in other states, other places. Now what you have is you have people of means who are leaving, who say, we can't deal anymore with these lockdowns. We can't deal anymore with these oppressive regulations and arbitrary rules. So we're leaving. And in a state that relies on a progressive income tax for the money that fuels its operation, losing your productive people is a fatal, fatal mistake.
So we've got to wrap up, but I do want to ask you one more question. What do you think do you think there's a long-term impact of all of this, or is this short-term? How do you think California is going to come out of this on the other side?
Well, the recovery is going to take a while because some of these businesses that are closing aren't going to open up. They're going to be done for good. And we've seen some restaurants, we've seen some movie theaters, we've seen any number of businesses say, all right, this is it, we're done. And when you have that happen, if you are the honey trap for a shopping center, you're a movie theater, and you bring people in so they go to the restaurants and go to the bars and shop for clothes and do those things, and suddenly you're done, it's a domino effect. And we're certainly going to see that up and down the state of California. That being said, the weather is good, so people will always want to live here, but it's going to take a very long time for California to recover from these horrific responses to this pandemic.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and updating us on everything that's going on in California.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up after the break, we take a close look at voting in Georgia. But first, here's America Q&A.
More positive news rather than negative.
I would like to see more of a neutral stance versus trying to push what they want to push.
I don't have an opinion on that.
The positive things.
You know, I try to stay away from TV. So, you know, the media really doesn't matter to me.
Good news, I think. I think that's one of the things that makes it so difficult for us to have a positive outlook on things, is the media is particularly focused on all of the things that are going wrong and crime, and it's hard not to. You need to be aware of these things, but I think if we were feeding a little bit more positivity out into the world, that we would get more back.
Try not to be biased, just report it as it is.
I would like to see more positive, upbeat stories, especially in the urban areas. What about some of the good stories where the kids are making good grades or helping senior citizens? Just something positive, because negativity wears on everybody, spiritually on your soul.
I wish the media would just start reporting the news instead of putting their own spin on it.
The truth, more honesty, more transparency.
Georgians are at the polls for early voting for those two critical Senate seats. Election Day is on January 5th. On the show yesterday, we heard from Susie Voiles, a veteran poll manager in Georgia's Fulton County with 20 years of experience. But she was fired after she testified about irregularities she saw during the general election. Those irregularities included a stack of pristine, never folded mail-in ballots that were being counted. We also spoke with Debbie Fisher, a Republican poll watcher in Cobb County, who was not fired, and she described her experiences last Monday during early voting. She said she saw pretty big inconsistencies in how the voting machines and ballot scanners were counting the ballots. To discuss the ongoing issues in Georgia, I sat down earlier with Garland Favorito, co-founder of a vote integrity watchdog group called Voters Organize for Trusted Election Results in Georgia. Welcome, Garland.
Thanks, Cindy. It's great to be back again. I appreciate it.
So I spoke to two poll watchers, actually a poll watcher and a former poll manager, because she's now been fired and has another one, or at least they haven't been brought back for the Senate runoff elections. Is that a concern to you?
Well, absolutely, Cindy, because as you know, Susan Voiles is a legitimate whistleblower with real life evidence of potentially fraudulent ballots in Fulton County. And her testimony is in affidavit, sworn in affidavit, unrebutted, along with three other counters like her, all have unrebutted affidavits that they handled fraudulent ballots, or at least potentially fraudulent ballots, during the audit in Fulton County. So the county's response to this is not to investigate the fraud, which apparently exists, but to terminate the whistleblowers like Susan Voiles and also like Bridget Thorne. As you know, Bridget did a fabulous interview on your show a week or two ago, and she explained how they were using test ballots, making test ballots that were on real live ballot stock, and then they were not controlling that stock after the test ballots were made, and those were thousands of ballots. So absolutely, it's a tremendous concern, not just for me, but from all the voters in the state of Georgia who are informed about this situation, because basically these whistleblowers who are trying to correct the fraud in Fulton County have now been terminated, and the people who actually appear to have committed the fraud on election night by illegally scanning 20,000 ballots into the Fulton County system after they had told the monitors they were not going to scan anymore, those people appear to still be able to count the votes for the upcoming U.S. Senate race. So everyone is asking, why? How is that going to be any more legitimate? The concern is if they stole the presidential race here in Georgia in 2020, why wouldn't they steal the runoff in 2021 in the U.S. Senate?
So I've been hearing the argument that since there's been so much controversy over the general election, there would be a lot more eyeballs watching very closely what's happening in Georgia. So it would be a lot harder to do anything untoward if indeed that would happen the first time. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think that is at least in part true because it is now the Republicans are all of a sudden have realized that there's a grave potential for election fraud, and they are on heightened awareness, and there's going to be a lot of more scrutiny over the election results and the process, but it's still subject to fraud. We saw that the same people are going to be counting again, apparently. Unless there are arrests between now and the 5th of January. And then you also have all the questions of the Dominion voting systems, which have found to be malfunctioning in multiple counties in the state of Georgia and actually in other counties throughout the country.
Right, our previous guest was explaining how there was about 122 vote difference, and I mean it was just a matter of 140 or 1,445, 1,577 vote counts on a machine, and the scanner and the voting machine were different by 122 votes.
Right, so that's what we call a mismatch between the number of voters who voted and the number of ballots that are cast. And it's remarkable how often this problem comes up with the not just with the Dominion voting systems, but really with any of the electronic voting systems. There are a lot of mismatches like that. That one, I think, involved roughly 10% of the total vote in that precinct.
Right, that's a very big number. Also, so there was some controversy recently with certifying the results in Coffee County. What happened there?
Wow, that's an amazing story, Cindy. And of course, all these stories are suppressed by the local news media here in Georgia. But that case, the county went to run the recount, which should have just been a simple matter of rescanning the barcodes and reprinting the previous unverifiable results. And they should have come up with the same totals because there's no other way to come up with anything different, pretty much. But what they found out that the machines produced 39 votes out of thin air with the same number of ballots cast, which that's the most important thing to understand. They reran the same number of ballots, and suddenly the machines had 39 more votes than they had before, spread across the 3 presidential candidates. So the county could not figure out for the life of why that would have occurred. And so they decided to, they would have to rerun it again. In the meantime, they did find 185 ballots that they had left out of the recount. So they put those in the recount, and the recount produced the exact same numbers again. So it completely disregarded the 185 ballots that they added and produced the same number and the same number of ballots and the same votes that it had in the previous one. So we know that was the second recount. They know that one was wrong. So they decided, well, this can't be right. Let's run it all one more time. Then maybe it'll come up right this time. They ran it the third time, and the system gave the same results again as it did in the second time. And that's when they threw up their hands and they said, this system is not trustworthy. We can't certify any of the recount results. We'll have to go back and certify the original counts, which were only about one or so different from the audit. So they decided to certify really the only thing that they had that was possibly accurate. And they wrote to the Secretary of State and they said, we're going to certify those results. And the Secretary of State was upset because they couldn't certify the recount because the machine malfunctioned. And he decides to open an investigation into the county, the elections director, and the board, rather than to try to fix the machine and try to understand what actually happened in Dominion with the Dominion system in Coffee County. So, of course, the correct thing he should have done was to do what we advocated for, and that was a forensics exam of that election management system in Coffee County. Instead, he chose to investigate the county.
That's a remarkable story that it would be so off twice. Is Coffee County doing anything else now to try to get redress?
Yeah, actually 3 times. It was off 3 times. And there's nothing that they can do. So the Dominion text came in. They looked at it during the recount. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. And the investigators from the Secretary of State's office came down, apparently 3 of them with their guns and badges, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. They brought another Dominion tech with them. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. And still, the Secretary of State will not order a forensic exam of that system. It's just unbelievable, the cover-up that's going on right now in Georgia.
Wow, that's a remarkable story. So are these machines, is all of the data of what happened in the November 3rd election still intact, or are they being, I remember there was talk of them being wiped ahead of the Senate runoff?
Yeah, so it's hard to know, Cindy. They typically reset the systems, which I believe would probably wipe out some of the data. You might be able to pull off the old data with a forensics exam because that can find deleted data. But right now, it's everything is up in the air, and because the Secretary of State's office is in such a cover-up mode, we really don't know what's going on. We're just continuing to advocate for forensics exams.
And what are the channels available to you for that?
Well, that's a good question because there is back and forth between the counties and the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State originally said that it was up to the counties, even though the Secretary of State purchased the machines, they were in county control, and the counties could allow for a forensics exam to be conducted, which would simply just be an image. All they have to do is get an image copy of what's on the database at the server right now. That's all they need. They don't have to do anything else to the server except copy it, which doesn't harm anything on it. But meanwhile, while they claim that the counties have that authority, the elections director of the state of Georgia sent them a letter saying that they would violate the law if they allowed for such a forensic report to be conducted because it might, quote, harm election security, unquote.
Wow.
That was kind of a joke.
Have you heard, so now we have the machines in Coffee County, and the testimony we heard earlier, or the interview we heard earlier about what was going on in Cobb County just for the Senate recounts. Have we heard more reports of this sort of mismatch between the voting machines and the scanner numbers?
Well, that's a really good question, Cindy, because typically we haven't been able to check that to the level that it needs to be checked. We know that Fulton County was originally off by 342, which wasn't a lot considering the number of ballots cast there. But that typically happens a lot, and we've found through previous discovery and other lawsuits and that there's consistently a mismatch of number of voters voted versus number of ballots cast in many different counties, and the results are still certified even with the discrepancies that exist.
So what do you think can be done ahead of the, completion of the Senate runoff election?
Well, it's a great question, Cindy. I wish I had a concrete answer for you on that because most of us down here in Georgia that actually are aware of what's going on are scratching our heads. We don't know what they can do. The first, there is right now at this time, we don't even know if there's an investigation into what Fulton County did on the early morning of November 4th. That still seems to be in cover-up mode there at Fulton County, and the Secretary of State is apparently covering up for the county, which is something that I would have never seen done. They're trying to say that all that ballot stuffing it was normal procedures, and so the real question that you're asking is what can be done if both the Secretary of State and in this case the county are in cover-up mode. I honestly don't know. I can tell you that I don't believe that the Secretary of State has any intention of or sincere desire to conduct legitimate, honest elections. They're just trying to cover their tracks at this point in time.
I see. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll check in again, I'm sure.
Thank you, Cindy. I wish I had better news for you.
And we have an update to that story. Today, Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger is condemning the firing of the two poll managers, whistleblowers Susie Voiles and Bridget Thorne. And he's calling on Fulton County election officials to rehire them for future elections. At the same time, there was no mention of his opening an investigation into their claims, and he reiterated his position that he has seen no credible evidence of widespread fraud. And that's all for tonight's show. Thank you so much for watching The Nation Speaks. Join us again on Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And from all of us here, good night.